In the middle, they'll come out. You see what in the middle? What? Yeah, I'll get to that in a minute. First of all, as far as turning our phones, it doesn't make a difference because there's no klita. I just found out myself. and two, I like to usually say that don't turn your phone off because you won't be able to concentrate. It's called a FOMO. The fear of missing out. People can concentrate much more if you put your phone on silent because if you're worried you might miss a message. You understand? And if you can check your message while you're driving, you can concentrate on the shir. So that's sort of a joke. Okay. But the main thing is it shouldn't ring. But it probably won't anyhow if you have Golan. Okay. Maybe another thing does work here. That means it's safe. Okay. And the shir are dedicated to Hatzlach of our soldiers and bringing home the hostages and Kvash Shemet all the wounded. And Lui Neshamot of all the fallen soldiers and civilians murdered in the war. And we're going to start with Tefillin Kuf Chaf Aleph. And then we go Shir LaMalot, Sainai LaRim Yain Yavo Ezri. Ezri Mim Adonai Osei Shemayim Ba'aretz. Al Yitei Lamod Raglecha Yinum Shomrecha. Yinei Lo Yanum V'Lo Yishan Shomer Yisrael. Adonai Shomrecha Neitzecha Ad Yad Yeminecha. יומם השמש לא יכך ויורח בלילה. אדוני ישמורך מכל רע ישמור את נפשך. אדוני ישמור את צאתך ובואך מעתה ועד עולם. Speaking of a word of introduction, I hope I'm not misunderstood, but I want to quote something that, what's his name, Blinken said yesterday, which probably annoyed us. Okay, a little louder, okay. I want to quote something that was on the news this morning by Blinken to Sarah Chutz. He's a Secretary of State, whatever his name is. He came and says, just because someone dehumanized you doesn't mean you have the right to dehumanize others. Now, you can argue right or wrong, and I'm not taking sides or anything. I'm saying in today's year we might see a biblical support of that idea. Okay? You'll judge as we go through. What I want to do is, the first year is on Parshat Mishpatim, about what's going on. But the first thing I want to do, the reason I'll give out a source sheet in the middle, I want to give you a little class about identifying units. I'll explain what I mean in a minute. What I want you to do is go back a week to Parshat Yitro. Okay? Open up Parshat Yitro, the end of Parshat Yitro. In chapter 20, in Perach Chaf, in Parshat Yitro, remember, pretend you're in shul and are you supposed to stand up, not supposed to stand up? Remember? You get the 10 Commandments, okay? And then when you actually do stand up, when do you sit down? So look when the 10 Commandments are over. Got it? You see Lo Tachmo, the whole thing, at the end of Perach Chaf. After the 10 Commandments, there's a short little story about the people getting scared. Remember that story? It was like too intense. Remember, we want to hear God directly, and then they get all scared. And then when the 10 Commandments are over, they say, Moshe, we get the point. Is this too much? You know what? You go to the class and give us your notes, pretty much. Remember? If you look at Pasuk Tetzayin probably, they tell Moshe, Daber Taibanu v'nishma, you speak with us, and we don't want to hear from God. And Moshe says, no, babam, and they take 3 steps back, remember? The people stand at a distance, and Moshe goes into the cloud where God is. And basically, what's the new setup? Instead of God speaking directly to the people, God's going to talk through Moshe to the people. Now, in light of that, take a careful look at Perach Chaf Pasuk Yotet. It's the last aliyah, isn't it? Should be Shvi? Mafter, even better. Mafter goes like this. What happens? Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, Kol Tomar B'nei Yisrael. Why? God tells Moshe, here's what you need to tell the children of Israel. Why? Because that's your new job. You're Moshe Rabbeinu. You're the teacher now. I'll teach you, and you teach them. Now, if I was putting in punctuation marks, I need to put a quotation mark here, don't I? Okay. And now from here, I need to identify where the quotation mark ends. I'm going to repeat that to make sure it's clear. God's going to begin to instruct Moshe Rabbeinu with a set of laws that follow the 10 Commandments on the same day of the 10 Commandments. Agreed? It's on the same day. They're still standing at a distance. Moshe goes up to get a set of laws. Now, the set of laws he's going to receive is not all 613. It's more than 10, less than 613. What I want you to find, just for a second, can you find, don't answer the question, just see if you've done that before. Can you find when God finishes talking to Moshe? Now, the section begins here, in the end of Perek Chaf, with the law about a mizbeach, about an altar, and it continues into Parshat Mishpatim. You understand my point? When we read Parshat Mishpatim, we're in the middle of a unit. It's not something new. It's part of a unit of laws that began a week ago. Problems we have Kiddush, we have Chol that breaks up the week. But there's a set of laws that begin with laws about don't make golden images out of me. If you want to serve me, keep it simple. Keep an earthen altar. You want to go fancy, out of stone, but not hewn stones. Basically, God's saying you keep it simple. If you want to serve me, I don't need gold and silver. That's a lot about how to serve God. And then we get to what's called Mishpatim. Understand? Which are a whole bunch of laws. Now, where does that unit of laws end? It continues in Perek Chaf Aleph. And that's why I want you to use a chumash like this. Just scan and see where the law section goes to. There's a whole bunch of laws. Yeah? Yeah, it goes all the way to the end of Chav Gimel. All the way till before Chav Daled, yeah. Because in Chav Daled, the narrator of Chumash comes back and tells us God told Moshe something else. Now, in this section, which is the end of chapter 20, all chapters 21, 22, and 23, it's primarily laws. The last section's a little promise, but I'll bring you to Israel one day. And I'll come and help you. But that's just the end. And just for the fun of it, you know what the last law of the law section is? It costs us a fortune. Look in Perek Chav Gimel Pasuk Yotet. Chav Gimel Yotet. What's that famous line? Remember Milchiks and Fleishiks? Okay. The rabbis have a heyday with that one, don't they? And cutest thing, if you want to have fun on Shabbat, look. Remember Tigum Unklus tries to translate Aramaic. It looks like Aramaic. It is Aramaic. But Unklus tries to translate everything exactly. If he changes translation to something important, guess how he translates Lo tvesh avdi b'chalav yimo. In English would be don't cook a kid in the milk of its mother, of a goat. Guess how they translate it in Aramaic? You can say it in English. It says, don't eat milk and meat. How come he does that? Because the Unklus was read in public. If someone hears, don't cook the goat, a kid goat in the milk of its mother, what might people think? It's only, the rabbis are kidding me. You follow? Let me get the mic off. No, it's only, Milchiks and Fleishiks is only a mammal, only sheep, only a goat, right? And how about chicken, all that other stuff, you know? Yeah. And it's only cooking. Who says cold, you follow? And so to make sure no one gets that idea, they translate it nice and no milk and meat. Okay. But it's rare that Unklus, he might add a word here and there to clarify something, but taking words out, almost never. It's just a little case. I was just stalling until people come in. Now we'll start the shir. Okay. Now, take a seat. The shorshi will come in the middle. If you need a chumash just for this part. Here's what I'm going to show you. The main thing I want to show you, there's 3 chapters of laws that come part and parcel with the 10 Commandments, okay, on the same day, and it seems like on this set of laws we're going to make a covenant called, when we say Nasa v'nishma, because in chapter 24 there's going to be a ceremony. Remember that ceremony? You were there? Remember, it's a Fleisha Kiddush. Whatever they talk about cheesecake on Shavuos. On the day of Har Sinai, we have a Fleisha Kiddush. There's Zvachim, there's Shlamim, there's a meat offering. Shlamim, we eat the meat. Parim, it's entrecot. What's it called? Entrecot, whatever it's called. Parim is cows. And there's a whole ceremony. We say Nasa v'nishma. Moshe sprinkles the blood on everybody. And just for the fun of it, you know what pasuk Nasa v'nishma is? It's real easy to remember. You've heard of Nasa v'nishma. We were all there? So it's 24/7 in Shemot, which is totally coincidental because we didn't make the chapter division, did we? So it's really cool. Okay, so look in Perek Chav Daled pasuk Zayin. Vayikach Moshe Sefer HaBrit. He takes the covenant and he reads it out and he says Nasa v'nishma. Okay. Now, what's important? Most likely, what's he reading? He's reading the laws of Parshat Mishpatim, but in kindergarten you learn maybe it was something earlier, but that's not for now. Now, okay. That's the, that was why we made the announcement about just one second. That's Murphy's Law, it's bound to happen. It's not your fault, it's called statistic. Now, okay. Now, back to, here's what I want to do. If there's a set of laws that are not the entire law system, but a set of laws, I'll call it now a box. What's going to be inside? What do I expect to find? Understand? I have a set of laws. We've heard of the 10 Commandments or the 10 Statements, the deep road, the real fundamental. But what am I going to find inside our first lesson about Judaism? I'll share with you a Ramban. Nachmanides, has a famous commentary in the beginning of Parshat Truma, that's next week, about why is the first set of laws when Moshe goes up to Har Sinai is about the Mishkan. Remember the Mishkan, the symbol? So he claims the Mishkan came first, etc. But he says the entire Mount Sinai event, okay, is actually a process. It's like conversion. It's like if you take this process of converting a convert, a stranger converting. First, you teach him. First, he has to want to be part of this group. He has to want to join. We teach him the basics, right? And then we teach him some core laws to get the idea, and then we can make it official. Then he can come to shul, basically. Got the idea? So he says the entire process of Am Yisrael getting out of Egypt, arriving at Har Sinai, entering a covenant, and getting a set of laws is similar to conversion. Where first I don't teach them all the laws, it's too much. I teach them the basic laws, and therefore, and only after I accept my Judaism with an understanding what the basic laws are, then I can have a Mishkan. Then we can dwell together. That's a famous Ramban, but basically he says that the laws of Parshat Mishpatim are sort of very basic to Judaism. You could argue with them, but that's a question. If I'm going to have 3 chapters of laws that come with the 10 Commandments, what am I going to expect to find? The most important laws? Got it? Or the most urgent? Remember, that's always the management thing. I'm sure you probably know management. When everything's messed up, you have to separate between what's urgent and what's important. You've heard that before, right? And what do most people waste their time doing? What's urgent. And what they never go around to, what's important. So you just have to manage yourself to make sure to find what's important and make urgent things less urgent, but I'm not teaching management. Now, I don't know how to either. Take a course. Now, what I want to get, what do I expect to find inside? Now, in most religions, most laws are about what? Man's relationship with God. Does Judaism have laws that relate to our relationship with God? Yeah, we have lots of them. Korbanot, don't we? Sure, lots of halachot, what's called Bein Adam Lamakom. But we also have laws of Bein Adam L'Chavero. Now, what would you expect to find in this law section? Pretend you never read it yet. We just entered a covenant to be God's people. Would I expect to find laws about how to serve God or about how to treat my fellow man? Understand? You know what we're going to find. We'll find both, aren't we? The question is, what's going to be the balance between them? And what I want to show you today, and that's why I'm saving this source sheet for the middle of this year, I want to show you today that when you study Chumash, you don't only pay attention to content, you pay attention to context. You understand the difference? I can have laws, but how the laws are presented is also part of the message.
Like they do at Harvard.
What?
Like they do at Harvard.
Oh, context, okay, yeah. My lawyer said I shouldn't say that, but but I can't say yes to that, but I won't say no, okay? So I don't want to get fired. I might have to quit. Okay.
Became a dirty word.
We listen to too much news nowadays. What do we have to? Okay, so we have a set of laws, and what I want to do first is take a quick tour of what's in the section without reading everything, because we're familiar with most of them. Look at the first set of laws right away. Let's look at the end of Parshat Yitro. The first thing God tells Moshe, tell the people, what did you see? You saw nothing. We'll see a bit. Yes. Atem ritem, he tells them in Perek Chaf, Pasuk Chaf already. Right? Tell the people, you saw that I spoke to you from heaven. Right? And therefore, remember, I'll give you an example because I teach always 18-year-olds these one-year program things. So whenever I teach this, like the idea of the Mishkan, Har Sinai was this big experience, wasn't it? You want to do something to remember the experience. So there's no one gap year program that at the end of the year the group doesn't make a sweatshirt. You familiar with that? Agreed? And nowadays you go 1 week of camp, there's already You have a t-shirt for the week. No matter what you're doing. But especially a year in Israel, you have a sweatshirt. Now, no one spending a year in Israel needs a sweatshirt because they have 20 at home, don't they? But what do they need? They need some symbol of their year. And the sweatshirt is only a tool, not it. What's important? What's on the sweatshirt? It's always interesting in anthropology someone's going to design it, who's going to be chosen to design it, and what are they going to put on it? Because if you want to analyze what educational message your students get, take a look at the sweatshirt they make at the end of the year. Understand? It was like a couple years ago there was a vaccine thing. Remember? During Corona years, there had to be a Corona thing. Unfortunately, this year will be you can guess really much what's going to be on this year's, but the sweatshirt reminds you of the experience. Understand? So therefore, God's saying, you just had this amazing event. You might think you want some symbol or some reminder of the event. God's saying, don't even think about it. Meaning what? Don't make out of me symbols of gold and silver. Got it? Instead, if you want to serve me, so keep it simple. I'm explaining like Sporno. If you want to go really fancy, you can make it out of stone. Right? But not chiseled stone, just simple stone. It's like, keep it simple. Now, are we going to listen to this or not? What's going to happen later on? A couple weeks from now? Aaron's going to tell the people, give me your gold, and make a symbol out of God, right? How do you do such a thing? You heard these laws, right? So the way I like to explain it, this isn't the main topic, but it's like a couple gets engaged, like our Sinai, and says, I don't need jewelry. You understand? Just be a good husband, keep it simple. I don't need anything fancy. Well, what's that mean? I'm not going to say no if I get one, but it's not about gold and silver. But it can't hurt, you understand? And then afterwards, you got to say, you misunderstood me. Now, back to, this is so side. If I want to understand what Aaron's up to by Chet Egel, it explains why they thought it was okay. Because Aaron really meant well. What went wrong? That's a different topic, not for today. Now, then we have Parshat Mishpatim. And what's the first set of laws? Everyone knows because it's the first Aliyah. How to treat a slave, okay? And I used to say this, but I can't say it anymore because it's called not thing. I used to say, a Jewish slave has more rights than a husband. Okay? But I can't say that anymore because I get in trouble. Okay? But I used to say. Now, but in general, what I'm getting at is that the way you treat a slave, basically, is way better than we were treated. Because for some reason, the first law we get about Beinan L'Chavero is how to treat a Jewish slave, an Eved Ivri. And he has rights. You own his work output, you don't own the person. Understand? And he has the right to go free after a while, and if he wants to stay, you have to give him... Basically, it's how to treat a human being, even though he's your slave, how to treat him properly. Now, I'd like to call that, that's the title of the share, Echoes of the Exodus. You know what echo is. But in the law section, it's not just dry laws. The laws echo our recent experience. Got my point? We went through this trauma of slavery as a nation for decades, if not hundreds of years. We're now free. What are we going to do when we become the big shots? Are we going to treat others like they treated us? Or are we going to take our experiences and learn from them? And we're going to see how Parshat Mishpatim is going to, that's not going to be everything, but it's going to be an echo. And we'll bring more examples. Now, that takes us for the first 11 verses, right? Pasuk Yud Bet, see that? I call it a big hit. No one got my joke. Why is it a big hit? Because Makesh B'Met Mot Yuma. Got it? Now, that sounds real simple. Okay, someone hits you, you hit him back. You learned that in kindergarten, didn't you? Okay? Don't let a bully get away with it. Bully him back? That's called the Middle East. Now, but there's a law. Now, how do you interpret that law? The rabbis have a heading that's called, there's a whole Masechet, isn't there? In other words, what do you mean? If you intend to hit them, right? Let's say you wanted to hit Reuven, and he said you had Shimon, remember? Let's say you wanted to hit him because you didn't like him, but you wanted to kill him, but you killed him anyhow. You understand? It gets really complicated. That's for the rabbis to work out. Chumash teaches us principles. Got it? Now, in the rest of chapter 21 are basically laws of assault. You know what assault is? Assault? Yeah, assault. When one human physically harms another human being. Could be intentional, unintentional, could be different results. But the bottom line is a human being who causes damage to another human being by assault is responsible for what he does, whether he meant to or not. Understand? Different levels of responsibility. We're setting up a principle. And the next section is, not only are you responsible for what you do, if you own an animal and it hits another human, right, you're responsible for your animal. Even though you didn't do anything wrong, but you have to watch your animal. It's called, pick up after your dog, whatever it's called. Isn't there a law like that in New York?
Pooper and scooper.
Yeah. What's it called? Poop in?
Pooper scooper.
Pooper scooper, okay. Now, if you leave it out on the street, can you be punished? Isn't there a fine? Yeah. No. Most laws, what's the difference between that? Listen, there are laws that come, don't do this, and if you do this, here's your punishment. It's called case law, isn't it? And then there's laws that say don't do it. But let's say there's this law, no littering. But anyone remember Israel from way back on the Egged buses? Used to be a sign in Hebrew, lo lefatzech garinim. Remember that sign, anybody? In English it said, no littering. You understand how cultural that was? Because Americans don't know what that means, but Israelis, do you remember lefatzech? How do you say lefatzech garinim? Yeah. Whatever they're called. What are garinim in English? Sunflower seeds. Yeah, but garinim are garinim. How can you get through Shabbos without them? So how can you talk without them if you're an Israeli? But but what I'm getting at, there's a difference between don't do that and if you do that, $25 fine. Understand? So some laws are written yes and do or don't, and some laws are written don't do this, and if this happens, here's the punishment. Understand? Now, who gives out the punishment? Right? In other words, you need not just not Rabbi. You need a court. No, you need a court system, right? In other words, Elam Mishpatim are for everyone needs to know the law, but who? What's what? Educates the law? Adjudicates. That's it. Educate to adjudicate. That's it. Now, who adjudicates the law? Shoftim. That's right. We have to have shoftim. The shoftim have to decide what to do. Now, what the rabbis do, there's all these cases. It's called case law. It's a classic way of writing laws in ancient times. Here's the case, here's the punishment. The rabbis say these aren't laws, these are principles. You with me? Now, in other words, if it says, your animal hits another animal, and then you're responsible, whatever it is, that's not a law, that's a principle. In Hebrew, it's called a daddy, an av. Now I think in Baba, aren't they doing Daf Yomi? We're just finishing Baba Kama now, right? Yeah. How does Baba Kama is not the name of the Masechet? What's the name of the Masechet? Nezikin. It's so big, it has 3 parts. It's so big. It's got the first part, the middle part, and the last part. What do you call the first part? But Baba doesn't mean part. Baba means gate. Why is it called gates? Because all the laws in Nezikin are about damages that are judged by the judges. That's why it's all in Parshat Mishpatim. Now, according to the Chumash, where do the judges sit? By the gate of the city. So it's not by chance that they call them gates. They're called avot. Now, but avot means principles, correct? So what are the rabbis doing? Remember, what's the first mission in Nezikin? Don't read Chumash, understand Chumash. I'm telling you, there's arba avot Nezikin. It means there's 4 basic principles, and they don't always match each other. You follow? So what do you do in a case where it's partly this principle and that principle? What do you have to do? You have to balance them. You have to balance your values. But that's what rabbis spend their whole time doing. What happens in all these crazy cases, and each new case becomes a precedent for the next case, for the next generation. That's called Torah Shabbat Peh. But it's called avot being principles of thing. And therefore, when the rabbis read Parshat Mishpatim, it's not case law, but it's case law that's teaching you principles. And then the rabbis derive principles, and then they apply that for the next couple thousand years. Now, what is the last Masechta in Nezikin, in Seder Nezikin, it's called, you guys call it Pirkei Avos, don't you? Yeah. Pirkei Avos is not the name of the Masechet. What's it really called? Avot, right? And it's not, people call ethics of our fathers. That's a terrible translation, because Pirkei Avot doesn't mean ethics, and Avot doesn't mean father. What are they? It's about principles, not of damages, principles of how to live your life. Now, who's sharing their principles about insights about life? The Tanaim. Remember? So what do you go? Someone says, Ashol Shadvar Mahalam Omed. You understand Turkey? Not Turkey. Masechet Avot. It includes ethics, but no word in the title means ethics. And avot doesn't mean fathers. It's principles of human life, of human behavior, of human life. And therefore, in the last we begin Nizikin with avot of Nizikin, and ends with avot of life. And these rabbis share with us their view about how to live, like principles about how to view life, how to live your life. Understand? But it's really nice how the whole Masechet Nizikin, not Masechet Nizikin, Seder Nizikin begins and ends with avot. You have the same concept in Shabbat, don't you? Remember? Avot, there's principle, there's malacha, but I have to drive a principle and then go and apply it. And don't ask your local rabbi because they take it to crazy extremes, but then I'll get in trouble. Now back to now that's chapter 21. Got it? We're good? Next chapter 20. Now let's look at chapter 22. You can cause damage by what do you call it? Something you do, something your property does. Got it? But it's usually through some type of assault. You can also cause damage by negligence, right? Let's say someone gives you something to watch and take care of. Or let's say you start a fire and it spreads. Let's say you dig a hole on the street. Or let's say you're digging a tunnel and a parking lot collapses, if you know what happened. You understand? No, I didn't want to cause damage, but my actions caused damage. We have to take responsibility. Got that? But what's common to everything here, human beings or their property, right? Or their actions cause some financial damage to another person. And the bottom line of all of them is we have to take responsibility for our actions, but we have to balance with the needs of society. So, society requires animals to walk in the street because animals have to walk in the street to go to the field. So it's, remember, short time, so it depends if it's you understand what happens? There's 50%, all this stuff of what's called Chatzi Nezek, without learning, I'm getting too tied into Nizikin. Now, that's not, why is that the first section? It's urgent law because it's about society, because every society needs basic civil law. The last case bothers us a lot. The last case of this case law is a case of a date that goes a little too good. I'm talking about a good example. I hope you know what I mean. And basically, a guy's daughter went dating, and it went too far. You follow? Now, what happens? You have to pay the father the damages because her value in the shidduch market just went way down. You know what I'm talking about? It's called onus u'mafata. Now, again, some people learn from there that Jewish law treats women like property. You ever heard that concept? Right? No, that's not the principle you learn from there. The principle is your actions. Got it? No matter what your thing is, if you've caused financial damage to someone else, even in a case like dating, you follow? You're still responsible. Understand? Even if understand my point? It's simply within the category of damage, financial damage you cause to another person, and taking responsibility for your actions.
Isn't it busha?
Okay, that's part of the same, but this is more than busha. This is like because it's a loss of the thing. Now, I don't learn from there that women are property. I learn from there that you do something, you're responsible for what you're doing. Now, that takes us until basically all these laws are called what? It's a principle, right? How to apply it? That's complicated, but it's definitely a principle. But it doesn't mean you take out someone else's eye for your eye. Yeah. The real deeper meaning. I'll take a break because what you said. When you study these laws and go to college, you get shocked. Why? Because these are all case laws, and the cases are very similar, not exactly the same, but very, very similar to Hammurabi law, which from the time of Avraham Avinu. It's way before. For everyone agrees it's before. Now, not only is it not a problem, it's super meaningful. Why? Because when Am Yisrael comes out of Egypt, we're not leaving in a vacuum, are we? We're coming from an Egyptian, from a Near Eastern culture. And if I want to start a new religion, and I want to take a nation that's going to be a model nation for other nations to learn from, every nation has a law system. In fact, that's one of the Noach laws, isn't it? Now, you should have a law system, and society has to read Locke and Hobbes. Yeah, Locke and Hobbes, whatever they're called. You learn in what's the first class you teach in law school? No, not Locke and Hobbes, isn't it? John Locke? About social contract and things like that. What gives the right of society to punish somebody else? It's all theory, but in general, every society needs a judicial system. Now, we want to have what's called Mishpat Tzedek. But you need some type of judicial system. Even banana republics have them. You follow? Even in Hong they have them. How they judge, that's something else. But every society needs that, and we shouldn't be any different. What Chumash is doing, it's taking a system that people are familiar with, and what's changing is the psak, what the judgment is. Some are the same, some are different. But the main difference it is, in Hammurabi law, who commits the crime affects the punishment. You follow? If you're a full-class citizen, and you kill your slave, you might say, no. Okay? And if you're a slave and you spit on your master, he puts you to death. You understand? The punishment is not based on what you did, it's based on who you are. You understand? And what Chumash is telling you, your punishment is based on what you did, irregardless of who you are. And therefore, if an owner hurts his slave, you don't know, if you kill, you're put to death. Right? In other words, what's gone up, if I compare our law system, this one, Hammurabi law, the rights of the slave, of the worker, have gone up like crazy, and there's no different levels of people. And that's why ayin tachat ayin, and not a function of who did it. That's what's important. But you pay the value of the fight, but it's not a function of who you are, so it's based on what you did. And everyone's equal under the law. And that's a giant chiddush. It's a novelty in its law section. But don't be surprised that we're beginning with a law section that people are familiar with, but we have to calibrate it for Torah's values. Now, that all stops pretty much in Per Chabet, Pasuk Yotet. Take a look at it. Chabet Yotet. We have all these laws about between man and his fellow man. And then what happens? What do we get? Chabet Yotet, we get Zovech lelohim yochoram b'til Hashem lavado. Out of nowhere. What kind of law is that? About idol worshiper, about don't bring korban to other gods. With me? But everything till here were case laws that go to Beit Din. Understand? The last two laws I'll leave about a machsheva. We'll leave them for if we have time. We'll get to it later on. That's a tiny little change. But Pasuk Yotet is what's called a buffer. I'm changing topics suddenly to between God and man. And then in Pasuk Chaf, a whole new ballgame. Look at Pasuk Chaf, 22:20, Chapet Chaf. What's it say here? V'ger lo tono v'lo techetzena. Why? Ki ger meitei be'eretz Mitzrayim. I'll translate. A stranger. What shouldn't you do? Don't cheat him, even though it's easy to. And don't put pressure on him. Why? Because you were slaves in Egypt. Now, how about a regular person? You can do that too? It's okay to cheat another person? No, it's not. But this is what's called a typical case. What's called Diber Katuv B'Lashon Hoveh. Chumash brings a typical case. It's easy to take advantage of a stranger or a migrant. You can pay him, if there's a migrant, you can pay him half wages, even quarter wages, and you're doing him a favor. You follow? But you can easily take advantage of someone's disposition. Chumash is saying, don't you dare do that. And if we weren't slaves in Egypt, it would be okay? What's this phrase at the end? Because we are strangers in Egypt.
It's because it's now.
A key here is a key word. Because up until now we had the word ki a lot. Ki gachshor. Ki always began a case. Should this happen, right, then here's the punishment. Ki is always the beginning of case law. Now we turn the word ki around, and count now means because now we're giving a moral imperative. Why? Why shouldn't you do it? Because you were strangers in Egypt. We'll clarify it in a minute. Now, look at the next line. Kol almana v'yatom lo tanun. Don't oppress who? An orphan or a widow. You can't do that to anybody, but definitely not them. Why? And what happens if you do that? Who's going to hear their cry? Shomeash, God will hear their cry. And then what will happen? What will God do to you? He'll turn your wife into a widow, which is a nice way of saying he'll kill you. You understand? That now, can Beit Din adjudicate these laws? They might be legal. Right? But who's adjudicating now? Now, there's laws for Beit Din, and now we change. They're no longer laws for Beit Din. These are absolute laws, not case laws. That's a whole new ballgame. Because some people think, if I'm not found guilty in court, I'm innocent. You understand? There's a whole system like that. Oh, if they didn't find me guilty, I'm a tzaddik. I was going to say Bibi, but it's okay. But the same idea. Now, because there's certain things that the court system can't decide on. But you need to know that you're responsible. And who's going to watch over you? God. Now, listen, what's that? God shomea shma tzakato. God hear the cry? Want to hear the echo? As long as you have to keep your finger wherever you are. And go back to the end of Perek Bet in Shmot. The last 3 lines of Perek Bet. Remember? There's, what do you call it? Bnei Yisrael in Egypt for a long time. And there's, and Melech Mitzrayim dies. Yeah, and what happens? Vayisaku Bnei Yisrael Hashem. Bnei Yisrael cry out to God. They thought the new king would be better, he's worse. And what happens? Look in Pasuk, the last 2 lines. There's Vayisaku Bnei Yisrael. Vayishma Hashem. The people cry out. They just cry out from the repression. Who hears their cry? What's it say in the end of Perek Bet? In Perek Bet, Pasuk, the last 2 lines. Pasuk Chabet, Chab Gimel. What is it? Yeah, okay. Yeah, what's it say? What did God hear? Vayishma Hashem et tzakatam. Vayizkorim et prito et Avram Yitzchak veYaakov. But it says, V'tal shavotam Elohim, that their cry came up to heaven. And that God heard the cry. They didn't say they cried out to God. It says they cried out. God heard their cry, went up to heaven. God heard the cry. He did something about it. Isn't that echoes of Exodus? In the law section, God heard your cry and did something about it. If you do the same thing when you're a boss, beware. You follow? It might happen. Yeah.
All right. So this thing that you taught that where it says ki ger yerim hayitam be'eretz.
Yeah.
So is this really a precedent? Because on the one hand, you could say, okay, whatever you're doing something that's illegal to somebody else. Okay? And it's illegal no matter who it is, whether
it's not necessarily illegal. It's
okay,
immoral.
Let's say, I'm just saying.
It can't go to court. Or the person might not take you to court.
Okay, well, let's say what I'm getting at is, like in the United States, what they've added additional laws called hate crime. In other words, you can be tried for whatever you did, but if you did it because you don't like that color of the skin or the religion or whatever, and it's called a hate crime, that's an added layer of punishment or an added layer or whatever. Is that what this is getting at?
I think this is totally different. I'll show you why. Because we're going to have a whole set of laws about. Look at the next law. There's another key word. I'm sorry, the im. Right? Im kesef tabet. We know this because we learned this on Chalamoid Sukkos, right? On Yontav Sukkos. I mean Pesach. On Pesach. We did Pesach first day Yontav. Or Chalamoid Shabbos. Yeah. Im kesef tabet. We'll see why later on.
Okay.
No, Chalamoid we read Kitisa. This we read on. Yeah, one of the. Yeah, Chalamoid. Yeah. So Im kesef tabet ami. What can't you do? You can't lean on it for the loan. You don't take interest, rebate. You don't take meshech. You follow? It's like biting somebody. And if you take a pikadon, if you take like a pledge, right? It's something they need, a blanket, or give it to them and give it back to them because they need it. You understand? It doesn't mean, therefore, don't lend money. It means lend money and be nice. If God blessed you with wealth, you become a trustee. But don't take advantage of that and don't be mean. Have sensitivity. Got that? That's about how you need to behave. Now, what's the next case? The next case is about being, being a good citizen, not cursing the judges, respecting leadership and things like that. But there's a whole set of laws. I'll just jump because we're running out of time. It goes on. Look in Parashah Gimel Pasuk Dalet. There's a whole different type of laws now to talk about behavior that don't have punishments. But Chet Gimel Dalet is a great example. What happens? You're walking down the street and you see an animal wandering. Got it? Now you know who the owner is. How do I know that we know who the owner is? Because whose animal is passing by? What's it say? Oiveki, someone who voted left wing. You understand? Someone who you have every reason to hate. You follow? You hate it. You know whose animal it is. And what can you do? It doesn't say don't keep it. For sure you can't keep it. That's stealing. But what could you do? Look the other way. Why should I help him? You understand? If it was my friend, I'll return it. But why? If it's someone I don't like, why return it? And what's the Torah telling you? What can't you do? You can't look the other way. In other words, you have to be proactive and go out of your way to return a lost item, even for somebody you don't like. Understand? And if this animal is crushing, it dropped its bag of groceries, Are you supposed to help them? Of course you have to help them, even though you don't like the person. Understand? Make him feel bad. Whatever it is. But what I'm getting at, those aren't lost. I can't take someone to court because you didn't return a lost item or because you let a lost item. It's not even returning a lost item. It's not being proactive to make sure the person's item doesn't get more lost. Do you understand? Right. Now, Beit Din, courts can't enforce that. But who's enforcing it? You understand? We have a whole set of ethical laws. Now, the most complicated one is Pasuk Zayin. Pasuk Zayin is very hard to keep. What's it called? Bidvar Sheker Terchak, right? The next one is most difficult for politicians. What's the next one? V'shochad lo tikach. See Pasuk Het? You can't take bribes. And even righteous people can be taken by bribes. Now, these are, again, you can't take, it's hard to take people to court on these things, but these are principles, again, about our behavior. But look, the main thing I want to get to is Pasuk Tet. Look at Pasuk Tet. I've known them. What time is Shir goes till? From 9:15 till? 10:15. To 10:15. For an hour, and then there's a break. The next one's at 10:30. Okay. So it gives us 15 more minutes. Okay. We'll get 20. We'll be fine. You with me? Now watch. Look in Pasuk 23:9. What's it say? You know what it feels like to be a stranger because you were strangers in Egypt. That explains everything, doesn't it? That's exactly echoes of text. It's saying, you of all people, didn't we have the exact same pasuk in the beginning of the unit? Now, what's we saying now? You of all people can't oppress a stranger. Why? Because you know what it feels like to be oppressed. Again, remember my introduction? I'm saying, you were mistreated. Now you know what it feels like to be mistreated. Don't you dare do that to somebody else. You know what it feels like. That's the difference between if I got bullied, you bully somebody back, or I got bullied, I know what it feels like, I will never do it to somebody else. It's called education. Now, as opposed to the jungle. Got that? Now, it's human tendency, he did it to me, I'll do it back to him. But the idea that I can, what Chumash is doing here is taking the history of our redemption and redeeming our history. We went through a terrible suffering in our history. The way we redeem our history is by learning from that suffering and making sure we become God's abomination not to do that to others. That's Chumash. That Chumash is screaming that. How to apply it? Don't ask your local politician. But halavai, we can ask our local rabbi. But it's a very difficult approach, and most people don't like it. But I'm saying Chumash is screaming it in Parshat Mishpatim. Again, I'm trying to stay away from the political side of it because it's really complicated. But I'm saying at the thematic level, at the core level, Chumash is teaching us if we suffer through something, the main thing we do is we remember that suffering, and we don't do that to others. Some people have a custom to remember our suffering in Egypt. Once a year they have this celebration to remember that God took us out of slavery. Okay? Not just to thank God for what happened, but to feel that they went through it. Remember? To be resensitized. It's not just gratitude, it's recognition of destiny. And some people go so far, not just to remember what's here, every day they talk about it when they pledge allegiance to God. What am I explaining? Kriyat Shema, which we pledge allegiance that He's our God, He's our boss, we're working for Him, we should love our job. But at the end of it, we have to remember why He took us out of Egypt, in fact, why He put us into Egypt to take us out. Remember Brit Ben Abtarim? In other words, God had this whole plan. When God picked Avram to become a great nation, to be a light to other nations, to bring blessing, He said, we needed to go through basic training to become God's people. So you can't negate that it's a core theme of Chumash. It's not just, we got stuck in Egypt and God saved us. It's all about gratitude. It's about understanding that in our history, sometimes we go through suffering, but we have to treat it like training to make sure that we don't do that to others, and we learn from that. We have to become God's model. Now, that's a high level of emunah. If you act that way, God will protect you. Now, the next law, look carefully. What's the next law? Now, where's the? Now, give out the source sheets. Fine. I'm sorry. You can give that. Pass them. We'll pass them around. You'll need them in a minute. The next law is about Shemitah, right? 6 days, and then a law about Shabbos, and then we get Shalosh Regalim, right? And then we finally finish. Now, notice what's happening, and that's what you see on the sheet. The law section begins with how to serve God, or how not to serve God. Understand? Then followed by case law, classic civil law, called Mishpatim. followed by a little break in the action about how not to serve God, about the Zoveach, right? And then we have another law section about ethical law, a moral law, from not mistreating people all the way till not taking bribes, returning lost items. It's a higher ethical code, and I'll give a name to both of them. And then we end with what? How to serve God again, with Shosh Regalim, with Shabbat Shemitah. And even Shabbat and Shemitah here, what are the reasons for Shabbat and Shemitah? Shabbat is between God and man, Shemitah, but what's the reason for Shemitah here? Remember, it's not Shabbat Lashem, it's Shemitah to the poor people of Havoti. What's the reason for Shabbat? So your workers have a day of rest. Take a look at Shabbat. What's say about Shabbat? 6 days you work, 7 days, Leman Yonuach, you need to take it, you have to close, anyone who lives in Teaneck or in Bergenfield, there's called blue laws. All the shopping's closed on Sunday. You've heard of that law? Some people, if you made out from Bergenfield, for whatever it is. But there's this concept that everyone needs a day of rest, and therefore businesses have to be closed, not for religious reasons, but every worker needs a day of rest, and if businesses aren't closed, that's a law system. By the way, the laws of Shabbos in Israel were passed by the left-wing parties together with the religious parties. It was a coalition when the state started because the left-wing parties also wanted a day of rest for socialistic reasons, because everyone needs a day of rest. And the second, in America, you have the right to shop. You understand? And the question is, do you have the right to? Does the government have the right to tell you can't make money today for the sake of society? That's society. You follow? That's a country's legislator system that's looking at a bigger picture about how they want to shape society. What values override. Now, on the paper I gave you, the introduction is what we read at the end of chapter 2. Remember, God heard our cry. Okay. I try to make Mishpatim I'm trying to make it as a unit. You follow? You see, the first law is Mizbeach Adamat Haseli, on the far outside. In the middle, Zoveach Elohim. At the end should be, what do you call it? Lo Tizbach Al Chabei Stam Zivchei. I didn't put there, but that's the... Yeah, it's at the end. It is there. My mistake. Okay? You understand? The last line. Lo Tizbach, Zoveach, Mizbeach. Got it? You see this section? The middle section, the first section, I call this for high school kids. I call it a double whopper. Remember? What's a double whopper? You have a hamburger, but with 2 layers, right? Yeah. Now, I have a bun on the bottom, bun on the top, and a bun in the middle. And what's the meat in the middle? Okay. The first burger is what? Our Mishpatim, which is classic civil law, upgraded Hammurabi. The second piece is what's called ethical law, or I call it tzedakah. Now, how come I'm using the words Mishpat and tzedakah? Go back to Breshit. Why were we chosen? Remember what God told Avram Avinu? Yeah. God picked Avram Avinu. Remember before when Avram's arguing, should God give Stone another chance? How bad is their behavior? So God tells Avram, you might not be able to save Stone, but I chose you to teach your children to be the tzaddikim, to give God a reason to save that society by having an effect on them. But what? I commanded you, I came to know you so that you teach your children, and they their children, the ways of God, which is doing tzedakah mishpat. What's our first lesson in Mount Sinai? Our first lesson is going to be how to build that society representing God. And therefore, in every religion, we serve God. Every religion has altars, and you have to feed your God. That's classic. You can't have a religion without ritual. That's why it begins, like every religion, with how to serve God. What type of altar does God want? What type of jewelry does He want? You follow? And it ends with our agricultural holidays. But the main way we serve God in Judaism is how we treat our fellow man, to the point that you might think that other human beings are in God's image. You ever hear such an idea? If every human being is in God's image, what's that called in Hebrew? Then the way you treat another human might be actually how you treat God. Now, you can reach a conclusion that certain humans aren't humans, okay? And that allows you to, but let's say you believe in values, but you want to dehumanize it. You say, oh, he's not a human, therefore I can do whatever I want to him. Remember Germany? No, it's first begin that, oh, they're not humans, therefore you can do terrible things. But what Chumash is saying is that every human being is in the image of God, and therefore the way you treat your fellow man also reflects how you serve God. And it's when it comes to religion, it's a revolution, because the main way we're going to serve God, how we're His people, even the Ten Commandments, is half and half, isn't it? Remember, I'm your God, but it's part of the but core values, lo tirtzach, lo tinaf, lo tignof, etc. And doing that is God's nation. Now, the ethical section is delimited by what? See, v'ger lo tonev lo tochatzenek yiger meitem eretz Mitzrayim. See that line connecting the second section? It ends with v'ger lo tochatz. Remember I told you in the beginning, when you study a section, pay attention not just to the content, but its context, how it's presented, its structure. And therefore, Chumash is teaching you a lesson not just by the laws it's teaching you, how they're presented. The fact they're presented is a unit, together with the Ten Commandments. In fact, some Parshatim see them almost reflecting the Ten Commandments. There's parallels. In other words, if we're taking Ten Commandments and expounding upon them, you can argue here and there, but there's definitely, you can read that into them. But I'm taking a concept and expounding it and applying it to building a society. We'll see, it'll happen in Sefer Dvarim even to a bigger extent. But what I want to end with though, but I hope you understand the chart. The chart is simply to show you, without having to read it, it's just the different sections. How the Mizbeach in the beginning, how to serve God, followed by Mishpatim, laws, I just brought some examples, and then Zovech Elohim is a delimiter, and then the ethical section begins with V'ger lo toneh, and ends with V'lo tochatz and V'ger lo tochatz. Chumash is repeating the same thing twice, but you see it's using that line as an envelope. Got my point? And everything's building up to V'atem yidatem et nefesh hager. And there's not a Chumash is teaching you to redeem your suffering, and if you went through something, don't do it to others. That builds your society. Now, one last thing, which is really interesting about the holidays. Look after the last V'ger lo tochatz v'atem yidatem et nefesh hager. That's pasuk tet where that line ends. We have the 6 years of Shmita, and the 7th year B'achlu evim yamecha. The poor people have what to eat. Shabbat is work 7-day rest, so your workers have a day of rest. Your animals, and hence your workers in the stranger. And then there's a really strange transition line, pasuk Yud Gimel. This is what it says. Uv'chol asher amarti lechem tishameru. That's the summary, isn't it? Everything I told you, pasuk Yud Gimel. Everything I told you, keep. And then it says, B'shem Elohim achrim lo taskiru lo yisham pecha. Don't you dare mention the names of not Voldemort, but who? We've heard that. But don't you dare mention the names of other gods. Isn't that a strange ending? What's it say? It says, everything I told you, keep. What's that referring to? Everything in this whole section. It's at the end of the law section. Everything I just told you about your just society, make sure to keep them. And don't you dare mention the names of other gods. You know why? That's not a conclusion. That's a transition to the Shalosh Regalim. Okay? Because the Shalosh Regalim in here are agricultural holidays. What's my proof? There's Chag HaAviv, right? B'chodesh Aviv, Chag HaMatzot, Chag HaKatzir, and Chag HaAsif. And what do we do on these 3 holidays? There's only one thing we do on these 3 holidays here. What do? We go to visit our boss, don't we? Now, why did people turn to gods during the agricultural, on the critical times of the agricultural season? When you begin your grain harvest, right? When you begin your fruit harvest, when you begin the rainy season. Remember? There's 3 critical times in Israel of the agricultural season. Why did people turn to God during those times of the year? What can those guys do for them? Yeah, I need a rain god for rain. What's his name in ancient Canaan? Baal. Remember? There's a fertility god, her name is Asherah. You ever heard the Canaanite gods? So an ancient man thought there's powers of gods. There's God, small g, with lots of powers, especially the ones of nature. Remember, there's wind, there's fire, there's the sun god. Remember, but it's the son of God, isn't he? I mean, it's the sun. God made the sun. But there's the spooky gods at night, staring at you, checking up on you at night. It's really spooky. But you begin to believe these gods control ask your astrologist. They control what's happening to you. Now, I want my crops to grow. I need water, I need rain. I need fertility, you follow? How do I get that in ancient time? I turn to the God in charge. You follow? Who's ever in charge? I go, who's in charge of that office? What ministry do I go to? And what about that? And I beg him, how do I get on my side? Take him out to lunch, buy him a present, you follow? That's idol worship. IDOL worship, isn't it? That's which turns into idol worship, IDLE. Understand my point? In other words, what's Chumash telling you? Don't think for a minute that there's many gods, which are called Elohim, many gods. Instead, there's Elohim. There's one God who created everything. Where does Chumash teach us that? That's the chapter of creation. Remember? For the sun, the moon, the stars, vegetation, animal, everything. Who made the whole system? God made that system, didn't he? Now, which means if I want rain, or if I want fertility, if I want nature to work with me, who do I have to turn to? To the one God, not to these other gods. But it's not just knowing who that God is, it's knowing based on what does he give us rain. You mumble this every day in Shema, don't you? Okay. What's it telling you? If you want to serve God, if you care about nature and the powers of nature, it's not enough to believe that who the right God is, which vending machine to go to. You're not just a consumer knowing who's the best guy to buy it. You're an employee. And you need to know that your boss is in charge, but he'll give you based on your deeds. Now you understand the transition? Keep these laws of Parshat Mishpatim. Build a just civil society. Have a just judicial system. Have an ethical system. Have people caring about other people. And caring about ethical behavior and learning from, don't bully back others. Learn from your vet's suffering to help other people. Build a society like that, and God will take care of nature and what happens with nature. It's not enough just to turn to God and pray to God. If the second you turn to God as a rain God, and God's working for you, that's Chumash calls that idol worship, IDLE. That's not. There's avodah zarah, that's serving the wrong God, and there's avodah zarah serving the right God the wrong way. Understand the difference between them? I call the idol worship and idol worship. IDLE and IDLE. So when the Torah talks about avodah zarah, is the zar the God or the avodah? Understand? What's it modifying? Is it a strange way of worshiping the right God, or worshiping the wrong God? But most avodah zarah that the Levim talk about is worshiping the right God the wrong way. Now, but what Chumash is telling you, we have this whole law section, and then it's telling you, on the key times of the agricultural season, come to visit God. Don't mention their gods, but come to see me in my office. Shosh regalim tochog li b'shana. Got it? As opposed to those other gods. And what do you need to remember? At the beginning of the rainy season, the beginning of the harvest season, what do you have to remember? That the harvest is a function of the one God, but he gives you, but you say every day in Shema based on your deeds. It's basic, and right after that we talk about remembering the Exodus. So what I'm trying to show you is that in the first, let me just summarize if my time is up, yeah. I'm trying to show you that together with the Ten Commandments comes a beautiful set, 3 chapters of laws. Are they most important, most urgent? You can argue. But they're a beautiful sampling of Jewish life and what it means to be a nation in the service of God. That at the base you have civil law, a judicial system where there's justice for people. We have to make sure of that. On top of that, that's not enough. There's another layer of ethical behavior where you have to know a fear of God, but also do it because it's the right thing to do. That's Ba'atat Hashem. It's loving God, doing it because it's the right thing. Do it also for reward and punishment because that's what also motivates people. But remember, you're doing it as a nation, and the main way you serve God is by how you treat your fellow man, not by how you treat God. We come to shul to leave. You understand my point? We come to shul to leave. That was then. Shul, when you come in daven and pray to God, is to remember your relationship with God, and that has to be transformative. That affects how you behave. If you remember why you're chosen, why God chose you, who is this God, why He created, and that He created, and what He expects from man, then if I remind myself of that every day, then that should affect how I behave when I leave shul or when I finish davening. You understand how davening becomes the same thing? You come visit God in the temple to know how to behave outside the temple. You understand the idea of emanating kedusha? I keep Shabbat to remember how to work. I'm supposed to work 6 days a week according to the Ten Commandments. Didn't we read that last Shabbos? Shesh Yemim Tavod? People aren't machmir on that too much. But you're supposed to work for a living. But you need to take a day of rest once a week to remember, to reflect on what you're doing and making sure you're going in the right direction. So I need that day off to give meaning to the work week. But that's the idea of Kedusha, we'll see later on. But what I'm trying to show you today is that the first set of laws that come with the Ten Commandments is a beautiful example of the first lesson in Judaism. When we become a nation serving God, where being Jewish is not only about our connection to God, which is super important, in our spiritual growth, but also part of our service of God is how we treat our fellow man and how we learn from our suffering to become better people. And if everyone says, what do you call it? He did to me, I'll do it to him. That's the Middle East. If everyone says, then who's going to start? Who's going to? If he's not going to change, I'm not going to change. Or are we going to be the example of make sure we don't do to others what people did to us? Okay? Again, that's in individual life. Again, I'm purposely not taking. Don't get me wrong. I'm taking our situation is really complicated. You follow? I wish I'm glad I don't have to be the one deciding. There's like impossible decisions to make. Right? But for Shurchim is saying if we build such a society and you have emunah, God hopefully will help us not to be in these situations again. But that might take several decades to build up again. But that's what's called education. Instead of that's what Chumash is teaching you, but it's a slow process. Anyway, we'll take our break, and there's another share in 10-15 minutes. Feel free to keep this.